It's so clear how a person's relationship with their parents when they were small plays a huge role in how their romantic relationships take shape later. And this is what we're talking about when we describe attachment styles. There are 5 basic styles. Secure, which is people who were well loved as kids and they feel generally safe and flexible in relationships. Then there's anxious preoccupied, which is people who worry all the time that they're not getting enough love, it's going to go away. Then there's the dismissive avoidant, and then there's the fearful avoidant, and there's the disorganized attached person. Those last 3, the dismissive avoidant, the fearful avoidant, the disorganized person, these 3, they have trouble giving love in a way that makes insecure people feel okay. So I've noticed that in videos and online, a lot of discussion is by insecure types like me about how to understand and cope with all the other attachment styles. Today, though, my letter is from a woman I'll call Lisa, who self-identifies as the avoidant one, and she wants to know how she can be a better partner. I think that's great. So let's look at what Lisa says. She says, "Hi, Anna. I've been struggling with my healing journey with CPTSD, and I wanted to write you in hopes to gain guidance on how to handle my trauma and triggers now that I'm 25 and wanting to be healthy." All right. "When I was born, my angry, manipulative, post-military narcissist father was abusive on every level, mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually." Okay. I'm circling stuff. I'll come back on a second reading, but let's go all the way through and see what Lisa has to say. "He never took accountability and never allowed us to express our thoughts or feelings. I have 2 older sisters, but I got the worst of it. We always lived on survival mode and grew up walking on eggshells. I understand that he was just projecting his own pain, but that doesn't help the triggers or trauma I'm dealing with today. My mom was unconditionally loving, but was submissive toward him and was living in a state of fear for her own life and her kids, and she was depressed. She did her best, but she wasn't able to protect us from him because he was too powerful. A few years later, my mom found the support and strength to get away from him and filed for divorce, and I refused to see him again. At this time, I was getting bullied really heavily, and I was told to end my life and that I would never be good enough or pretty enough by the kids at school. Damn kids. I was in a lot of pain at this time. When I was 14, my mom got diagnosed with cancer and passed away 2 weeks after we found out. I ended up having to move states to live with my aunt, who's very critical, made me feel like a burden, always compared me to others, and gave me body dimorphism. That's where you're like picking on yourself all the time, finding flaws with yourself. I was never enough for her. I also understand where her pain stems from, and I realize that it's a product of how she grew up and feels about herself. It still doesn't make it easier not to internalize. When I was 18, I moved out on my own, and in the years to come, I dated a few guys who all cheated on me, compared me, and made me feel like a burden to love. It really made me have so many trust issues and low self-esteem. Flash forward to now, I met such a beautiful soul last year, and he and I have been dating for about 6 months. He truly loves me and shows me what a true partner is and is very healthy and secure. The only problem is I realize that I have adopted some behaviors from my family and exes that I've been subconsciously projecting onto my very loving boyfriend, and I've drained him in many ways, such as fear of intimacy. I have an anxious avoidant attachment style, a lot of fears, insecurities, difficulty trusting, emotional unavailability, controlling tendencies, defensiveness, not feeling lovable, and worst case scenario, assumption thinking. He has been wonderful, and he supports my healing journey and loves me through it. I feel as I'm just hurting him by being so traumatized, and I can understand why he feels so drained. I was wondering if there's any guidance you have to help overcome all of this CPTSD trauma, and how to stop assuming the worst outcome or thinking the worst of my boyfriend and myself, as well as how to show up for him in a loving way while I'm getting triggered. Also, since I deal with hefty self-doubt and worthiness issues, is there any guidance you have on how to heal that fully and create a healthy, secure attachment? I love my boyfriend so much, and I'm here not to self-reject or self-sabotage and hurt him anymore through my pain. Do you think I can have a healthy partnership with him and myself after having all that abuse and pain? If so, how do I do that? Lisa. Okay. Gosh, Lisa, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. Your trauma was pretty heavy. I'm so sorry all of that happened to you. You know, with the dad and the violence and then losing your mom, you know, after a 2-week illness with cancer when you were 14, and then an aunt who wasn't into you and picked on you. I can just totally understand why everything got hard for you. I can just totally understand it. And it sounds to me like you do have some compassion for yourself. But that's the thing, like we have sympathy for ourselves, ideally, that this happened, it wasn't our fault, it hurt us. And we still have a responsibility to try to overcome the behaviors that sabotage us and that hurt other people. So I'm just really proud of you. Like, you're so focused on a caring mission to overcome your trauma so that you can be good to somebody else. That's a very good goal. I'd love you for that. If everybody who ever had trauma did that, it would be a wonderful world, right? And that's what everybody's here watching. And so just thank you for being an example to all of us about how it's possible to have optimism and to take positive actions even when you've been through something terrible. I'm really happy you found somebody who loves you. That's wonderful. I believe you that the relationship is at risk. I just take you at face value about this. I'm not going to try to say, oh, no, it's fine, or, oh, it's so much worse than you think. I'm just going to take it at face value. It is what you say it is. There's a risk that you're going to ruin it with him. So I thought what was interesting is that you gave such a long list of attributes of yourself that are, you know, some pathological, something wrong. Anxious avoidant, a lot of fears, insecurities, difficulty trusting, emotional unavailability, controlling tendencies, and on and on. And you could be right, but anyway, I noticed that because it shows that you've been working on yourself. I can tell you've been working comprehensively to try to identify what's wrong. That's very good work, but please don't forget that those are all accompanied by all the strengths and virtues that you also bring to it. And I know they're there, or you would not be being loved right now by a good person, right? You wouldn't have even survived childhood if you didn't have strengths and good things about you, right? You know, that are also going on. So don't forget, you're a mix of things. You are a mix of things. Part of even the trauma itself has things that it gave you that make you special in a good way. I think a lot of us have grit. A lot of us have empathy for other people who are sad. A lot of us understand how complicated people can be, that they can, on the outside, look like everything's together, but be struggling on the inside. Like, we have a certain wisdom and strength as a result of growing up with trauma. So just don't be so hard on yourself. You're not just a bundle of faults. You're a bundle of all kinds of things. But this is what we're doing here when we're healing. We're learning to become aware of what might be going wrong, what we might be doing that's self-sabotaging or hurtful to others. You know, what might be just tripping ourselves and getting in our own way. We become aware of those things, and then gently, with the help of people who have perspective on this too. Because you give it to us and we'll just, you know, you could just drown in all this like self-diagnosis. I'm so screwed up. I so know that feeling. It's just a horrible feeling to just be like, oh, when I think about it, it's just so many things are wrong with me. How could I even go on? So that's a wrong thought. That's a trauma-driven thought. You have a lot of words, but actually what you're talking about here are, in the approach that I use to heal, what you're talking about is a lot of different faces of what I label as fear and resentment. You know, it's like this anxiety and this anger. Those are like the two emotional buckets that all those negative feelings and reactions, they go in there, they're generated there. And to heal your trauma, it can help so much if you have a way to relieve and sort of decompress all that fear and resentment, to release it, to name it and get it out. So I'm always teaching about these techniques. That I learned them 29 years ago. My trauma was completely overwhelming. I was not okay at all at the time. Somebody happened to show me a way to name and write my fears and resentments on paper. If anybody watching, you're thinking of trying this, please take my free course. Don't just go start writing a bunch of negative thoughts on paper. That can make you feel worse. This is a specific technique to name and then release the fears and resentments. And the technique that I can show you, it's time tested. Many people have used it, and it will help you on your way. You do this twice a day, and then you follow it with meditation. And together, the writing and the meditation are what I call the daily practice. And I just keep doing it, and I keep overcoming my past in a way that I never thought was possible for myself. When I was, 30 years old, what was happening was my trauma was really like getting out of the bag. I had a bad thing happen. I was attacked on the street. Boom, all my trauma opened up. I had childhood PTSD, but it had been kind of contained before then, and it got out and I couldn't function. I couldn't read. I was panicking. I was like, oh my God, somebody save me. I was going to therapy 3 times a week. Nothing was saving me. And it would just happen in that moment. Somebody showed me how to do this, how to do this writing. And instantly, to be able to write what was bothering me on paper started to feel so much better. Now, again, I coach people on this all the time, and people who just write what's bothering them, it's sort of like ranting. You can ratchet yourself up this way. But writing, and there's research behind this. James Pennebaker from University of Texas in Austin has done research on what he calls emotional writing. People clinically recover faster. They get less sick. They get free of depression faster when they write their hurt feelings. The feelings that are sad and stressful are going on paper. It's a different brain pathway. It's a different brain pathway than talking about things. So it can represent a radical departure from what you were maybe conditioned to do, which is talk to friends or talk to a therapist, which can all be helpful, but it's really different than writing it, which can be a way of naming it and getting a release from it, getting the hold off of you. I just hear a lot of that. There's this self-attack going on. So the way your parents didn't take care of you, not only, kind of like left you to fend for yourself, but hurt you. What that can do is it can set you up to have this sort of insatiable need for somebody to kind of get in there and take care of you. And it gets so complicated with like attachment wounds, because on the one hand, you can't deal with it. You got to push them away, but it's like, I need you. I push you away. I need you. I push you away. And it's a lot of drama, right? So it's okay. It's normal. It's normal. But yeah, it can put so much strain on a relationship that it doesn't work. So what can be different is when you take your distressed thoughts instead of, and this is like, we're all conditioned to do this. It's like, honey, I'm feeling kind of anxious. I was thinking about something you said and it made me mad, and now I'm sad, and now I'm afraid you're going to leave. And we want to have all that through dialogue with them. But if you do that, it starts to like set off fireworks and problems and like, hey, I didn't say that. Now you're making things up. And now you're in an argument, and an argument can be even more dysregulating. So before you try to talk to your partner about something that you're feeling upset about or you're worried you did wrong, first you take it to the paper. First you take it to the paper and you begin. I have fear, for example, I shouldn't have put so many demands on Roger. Made up a name, right? Fear I'm too needy. Fear I was harsh. Fear sooner or later he's going to get sick of me. So I'm just, speculating what your fears might be there. I'm resentful at myself. It could be yourself. It could be somebody else. I'm resentful at myself because I have fear. I didn't read that book that the therapist mentioned, and fear now I'm acting out, and fear I could have done better, and fear Roger will see that I didn't even try. So I'm just making things up about things that you might write if you do this daily practice. And all of these fears come out on paper, and then you stop and you take a rest in a very simple, restful meditation for 20 minutes. Just sit down, close your eyes, have a rest. I tell people, you can all get this in the free class that I teach, the daily practice. And I will show you a link at the end of the video. But when you do this, all that that anxiety, that worry, that anxious attachment feeling, those emotions, they go out on the paper and you have a little break from them. And they're going to come back, they always do. But if you keep releasing them enough times after you write, there's a whole thing that you write at the end to release it or ask for it to be removed. And if you do that enough times, you start to get in the habit of actually releasing it and not carrying it around. When you have less of that fear and resentment in here, you have less demands, less accusation, less crying, less fighting coming out of your mouth and coming out towards the people you love. That's how it works. Those feelings have to go somewhere. They have to go somewhere, but talking about them is not always productive. So the daily practice is a way you can name and write them. You can also get a buddy to do it with and read to them sometimes. And that's a wonderful thing that we can facilitate in our membership program. We do that. But the first step is to just learn the technique, and that's what I want to encourage people to do. So I think you can save your relationship. I think that's entirely possible. What needs to ratchet down is the negativity and intensity that I'm intuiting you're saying, that you're having a lot of inner turmoil about the dynamic going on, and you're not giving him, you say you're avoidant. So if you're avoidant, that would mean that you're sort of pulling away. You're not being very emotionally responsive to him when he's hurt. So an avoidant can be a good partner, but what they can, there's a compensation you can do. I think avoidants are likely to be avoidant all their lives to one degree or another, but you can teach yourself skills to be a good partner anyway. And what it involves is, in a nutshell, you got to meet your partner halfway. So let's say your partner likes to be verbally reassured that when they say, I love you, that you say, I love you back. When they say, that hurt my feelings that you said that, you say, oh, tell me about that. Why do you feel that way? You don't just go, I'm not going to listen to this again. I'm going in the other room, or ignore when somebody is reaching out to say they love you. The Gottman Institute, the Gottmans have come up with a technique that's very helpful for couples, I think. And they talk about this idea of bids. Members of a couple make a bid to the other when they're like, ooh, do you think this shirt looks nice on me? That's a bid to look at me, pay attention, connect with me. Or you could say, boy, it'd be really nice to sit down and just have dinner together right now. That's a bid. We say things to try to invite the person to kind of connect with us. And what avoidant people do is it goes over their head sometimes. And so you want to teach yourself to hear the bid that they're asking for your attention and time right now. And it's not wrong. It's a little different than how you would do things if you were in charge of reality, but none of us is. So an avoidant person can meet halfway, but the other person has to have a little bit of allowance. This is an avoidant person. Don't freak out if they're a little bit aloof sometimes. That's how they're wired. They meet you halfway too, and that, I think, is how people can have a good relationship, even though they have different attachment styles, and neither of them are secure. That's entirely possible. I think you said that your boyfriend does have secure attachment, but different things can work if people are willing to pay attention to what's needed by their partner. Avoidance is a style of relating to other people, often driven by past trauma, that can make you feel overwhelmed and anxious, even thinking about connecting with other people. And if you've ever dated an avoidant person, you know how painful it can be to feel like you can never pin them down for plans or get a commitment from them. And just when relationships start feeling like they're going somewhere, the avoidant person will disappear for days or weeks at a time, and your heart just falls. Avoidants pull away from closeness, even when they want it. And ironically, what avoidant people are sometimes drawn to is people they can't have, people who may be avoidant in their own right. So there's a weird kind of safety for avoidance in a relationship that can't go anywhere. And my letter today is from a woman I'll call Amelie. And she writes, Hi, Anna. I'm a 45-year-old woman from Southern Europe. I was diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder, a very crippling form of anxiety, for those who don't know, about 15 years ago. All right, I've got my fairy pencil. So avoidant personality disorder, I don't diagnose it, but I know what it is, and it's a more concrete diagnosis of symptoms that sometimes show up just as avoidant tendencies. So whether you have tendencies or you're in a relationship with one, you're going to want to watch this video. So she was diagnosed 15 years ago, and she says, although the first symptoms became apparent when I was a teenager, even as a child, I already felt different. She says, as an aside, my father was an avoidant as well, and my mother has extreme anxiety. Okay. Since my father was hardly present during my bringing up, my mother passed her neurosis, her abandonment and rejection issues onto me. To this day, I live with them. I have no partner, no children, and I've just recently got a temporary job after years and years of not working. And we've always had some codependency issues. I live alone in a different city for just 5 years. I believe that that may be the reason that the few and far between relationships, if they can be called that, I've had along the years have all been with emotionally unavailable men. The most recent began last year. After a long time, it felt absolutely wonderful, though overwhelming. I met him through a group on Facebook. He seemed to be interested in me, and when we finally met, there was a deep connection. However, I knew he had a girlfriend and a 10-year relationship, even though apparently they had been going through a crisis the last months. Famous. That's what they say. Okay. So the next thing I did was wait. I sent him a friend request on Facebook. I waited a little in case he sent it to me, which didn't happen. And for someone like me, that required quite a lot of courage. I was about to accept that since he was already attached, nothing would happen and maybe I had misinterpreted his signals, although I was sure I wasn't wrong, when he suddenly started flirting with me more actively. I thought, well, maybe he's broken up with his girlfriend, so I'll take my chances. I passed him my phone number and we started texting each other. He always said that I could go and visit him whenever I wanted, so I set a date. We met him at the same bar we'd met the first time, and then we went to his place and slept together. It was amazing, and he said he wanted to see me again soon. I was smitten, especially because he was very affectionate, and I had never experienced that with any other man in my life. I felt I didn't have to hold myself with him, so to speak. In the following weeks, I asked him at least 3 times to meet again, but he always said he couldn't. So I stopped texting for a week and finally asked him if he had been sincere when he said that he liked me a lot and wanted us to meet again, because I was getting really confused. This is always the word that shows up in denial about something that's wrong, you know? I see it again and again in these half-love relationships. Okay. I was getting really confused by his attitude. And then he told me about his ex-girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend? Apparently she was struggling with substance addiction and he was trying to help her get over it. Oh, a few red flags flying here. I won't go into details about the last time I saw him during that period, but he said he had to focus on her for a time being and he couldn't see me anymore. I was devastated, but I decided that I'd wait for him for a while. Okay, so monogamous with his ex. Isn't exactly an ex, but that's okay. He never presented himself as available, actually. All right. After 10 months of just hanging on hope, I still saw him on Facebook, and I had brief exchanges with him. I was reluctantly, though, about to move on, and he suddenly texted me and showed interest again. I wonder what he wanted. We reconnected and started seeing each other. I usually went to his place. He lives in a different city. We watched movies, had sex, and I spent the night there. Oh, I'm going to say something about that. It's going to be hard to hear. Okay. This went on irregularly, and it stressed me out, and I never knew when to text, when to tell him I wanted to see him. I even asked him first if he wanted to see me again, and he always replied, of course, whenever you want. I was afraid of rejection. I didn't want to appear too clingy, but I always wanted to show interest by communicating more or less regularly with him. All right, so you're trying to construct how to act. I struggle with communication, and that took a lot of effort on my part. As an avoidant, I can spend months without replying to my friends' texts when I'm at my worst, and I felt that the way he communicated with me was a bit erratic. He once told me he might have ADHD, though, so I wasn't sure. That's not why. Okay. I was upfront with him about my anxiety and my insecurities, and he was okay with it. After 2 months of seeing each other, I felt I needed to ask him if he was interested in pursuing a relationship, or were we just seeing each other casually. So I gathered the courage to do it. And at first he was surprised because he thought it was already a given that this was casual. We'd never talked about it, so I guess he took it for granted. Yeah. He said he didn't want a partner. He didn't want to take care of anybody or be taken care of. I understand that he had just left a 10-year relationship, and a complicated one at that, and he wasn't ready yet. So I asked if he didn't want a partner for the time being, or like ever, and he said never. And since he wanted to be a father, he was even considering having kids on his own. I thought he was maybe just not into you, but that's where I was like, oh, that's an avoidant plan. Okay. I cried, he comforted me, and we talked a lot. And I asked him if he would go back to his ex-girlfriend, from whom, after all, he was apart due to circumstances more than anything else. He said probably not, but he wasn't really sure of anything, and her parents have asked him to go back to her. Oh, well. You know, I think there's a lot to the story there with him that he didn't tell you. He looked genuinely upset because he realized we may not see each other again, and he said he really liked me. He considered me a friend. He liked being with me, and I said I needed to think about it, and I was exhausted because I invested so much in this, and I guess I needed rest. Yeah. A month has passed since the last time we saw each other. We sent each other a couple of messages the first week, and during this time I've focused on looking for a job, and I found a job. He congratulated me for that, by the way, a temporary one, but struggling with avoidant personality disorder, that's a small victory. I didn't go on Facebook because I didn't want to be expecting to see any post or comment by him as I'd been doing for the last year. However, I missed him a lot, and I'm not sure I made the right decision. Even if temporarily, I believe it was necessary, at least to lower my high levels of anxiety. Okay, we're going to talk about what is that anxiety in a minute. I realize I've put lots of expectations on this relationship and person, but above all, I've put high expectations on me. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I didn't want to be a disappointment, and according to him, I wasn't at all. I really wanted this to work out, and maybe that was my mistake. Why couldn't I be more carefree? Because you're you, because it's not true. Why not date him without expecting anything and focus on myself more? Yes, I bet he would have liked that. I bet that would have worked really beautifully for him. At your expense, okay. Why did I anticipate so much and didn't respect my own needs? There's the question. My feelings, my tempos. Why not enjoy myself just out of healthy selfishness and cut all the drama? Whose selfishness? Okay, it's not drama. It's not drama. It's feelings. It is needs. You're not being dramatic. You tried really hard to hide who you are here and how you actually feel to make this breadcrumb relationship work. But it wasn't enough. It can't be enough because you're a human being. You know, you're a dear and precious human being, and of course you need to be loved, not just used for sex. So he said, that's what I'm worried about. I have a hard time knowing what I want, and I'm even scared. I think you're good at knowing what you want. It's hard for you to admit because it ruins the relationship for you. It makes it so it has to end, and that's hard to face, I know. I'm even scared of it, especially if it doesn't match the idea I have of myself in my head. For example, being okay with having a casual relationship with somebody. I have a hard time picturing myself in that situation. Me too, lots of us. And if I've already been in it, even repeatedly, I don't know if that's because it's a genuine need of mine to be as much of a priority to someone as I make them for me. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a priority. It is a need. I'm scared of being truly loved sometimes, or because of some rigid mental construct I developed at some point in my life and can't get rid of. That is a point of view that some people have who are into casual sex, and they will tell you that they will even criticize that you have this rigid mental construct of like, monogamy, what is that? Because that's what they want, but that's not what you want. They can pursue what they want, but you get to pursue what you want. And what you want is important and real to actually be loved back. It's no joke. That's not too much to ask. It's not too much to ask. But it's a little harder to find. It's easy enough to find somebody who will have sex without any kind of relationship. All right, I'm going to say the thing I didn't say before. That thing where you got together with him and you would go to his apartment and you guys would watch TV, have sex, and then you'd leave. But he really had some other girlfriend. And I was just going to say, that reminds me of DoorDash. And that's in no way to try to denigrate you, but that's how he was using you. You know, he just got sex delivered. I'm going to say something else. I don't normally do all the commenting in the middle of the letter, but let's just go for it here. Because this letter bothers me. You know, he was doing his own thing. He probably could have been clearer. I don't think he's being straightforward about the girlfriend. I think he clearly has entanglement with this ex-girlfriend, that her parents' opinion of the whole thing even matters, and that he's helping her with her chemical dependency. So that is something that people do sometimes, but it doesn't mean they can't date if it's truly an ex. So he has a primary relationship with her, and she's not always around. It sounds like a difficult relationship, and he's just kind of like getting his needs met to have somebody to have sex with, whenever he feels like making the phone call. So that's what, I just do think that's what was going on there, and people can chime in on the comments. And so it's confusing because what we do is we convince ourselves that what other people want ought to be what we want, rather than allowing ourselves to be clear, it's not what I want. And so we end up in a relationship, and that feeling of attraction and falling in love with somebody and sex and everything, it's so like exciting and overwhelming that it's very hard to stay in touch with what you know to be true, which is like, this isn't going to work for me because they don't give me anything back. When somebody likes you, you don't always have to be at their apartment. They take you out. They call you. They don't leave you feeling anxious all the time, whether they're gonna get in touch. That might happen in the beginning when the relationship is getting figured out. But over a year, when you were asking yourself, why can't I be more lighthearted? It's like, because this is terrible. This is like a form of trauma bonding when somebody's like, oh, I'm really into you today, and now I ignore you, and week after week after week. And so, it's instinctive for those of us deprived of love when we were little to just sort of go, fine, I'll adjust myself. I'll make my needs very tiny. If he'll just call me later, I will pretend that nothing was weird about that, and I won't be a difficult girlfriend by feeling upset about it. I'm so proud of you for asking him about the relationship. That takes so much courage, especially for an avoidant. But just because you have avoidant personality disorder doesn't mean you don't get to set standards for yourself. And I just want to at least give you this one rule of thumb. If you're interested in somebody and you know that they have a partner, do not date them. Don't Facebook them. It'd be one thing if it was somebody you're not interested in, and it seriously is a friend and there's no like vibe there, any vibe at all. They have a girlfriend. You stay away. You don't text. You don't even respond to their texts. You call them out if they text you and flirt. You will find, you're a young woman, you're going to find there are some men who are going to flirt with you, even though they have a girlfriend who they're not honest with about it. I do not get the impression he was honest with this other woman about you. Some of the people in our community will go, oh, polyamory is great, for them, but for people with attachment wounds, which I can hear you have, by the way you dissociate from yourself and your own needs and what you want, your honest truth, because it wasn't his agenda. Sometimes we just want to make it work at all costs because having that little bit of love feels like all we're ever going to have. And it is, I get it. It is so hard to shut the door when you know that what's waiting on the other side is no love for a while. But the only way to get to where real love is available to you is to start being clear what it is that you want. And I hear everything that you say here is you want reciprocal love. You want someone who loves you and wants to hang out with you. That's fine. That's a good and wholesome thing to want. I encourage you, embrace it, own it, claim it, put it out there. That's what you want. And then when you're clear about that, if you take my dating course, the first thing you do is write all this down. You write it down so you can't go in denial about it. If you start getting confused about somebody's behavior, just test out my hypothesis. It's denial. You're not confused. It's like you're in cognitive dissonance because it's hard to let in that the way they're treating you is not like somebody who likes you. And so instead of facing that and being disappointed and having to end it, we'll get confused. So I see this over and over again. Being crappy childhood fairy, I have a unique perspective on the patterns that I never would have noticed in regular life before people sent me all these letters, but that's what I see. I'm confused. And it's this type of relationship that throws people into it. So that's why I'm here to go, I don't think it's confusing. He is not looking for a relationship. You're trying to fit yourself to that. You don't want to lose him. You're trying to see if you can take everything that you want in life and throw it away and match what he wants. So at least you can, get a phone call every few weeks for sex. And I just think if you do that, not only will the whole period of time you're engaged in that block you from meeting somebody appropriate, it'll keep you from growing into somebody who can meet somebody who loves you back. It'll keep you getting hurt and hurt and hurt. And when you keep getting hurt like that, it takes something away from you. It's more to heal in the future. You get your heart broken once, you end up doing stuff that's against your own values one time. There's this much hurt. You bounce back. You try again. But if you keep doing this pattern, it takes it out of you till it's just harder and harder to come back. I don't think it's ever too late for anybody. I don't want to, take away hope from anybody. You can always change, but it takes a great deal of commitment. And sometimes, we just can't love ourselves yet. We don't really have that self-respect yet. But where that self-love and self-respect comes from is from doing self-loving and self-respecting actions that can be defined by others. So I don't know, you might want to take my dating course. You might want to be in some kind of group with other women who are working on how they have relationships. I don't know if there's stuff for other women who have avoidant personality disorder. maybe that's a hard thing, is to get a bunch of avoidants together in the same room. But you could go to a 12-step group, and adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families, or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous for people who struggle with boundaries in relationships. You could do that. Stick with the women. Find people who you respect and you can be honest with, so that when you start to have a dilemma next time when you meet somebody new, or you need help breaking up with this one in a way that feels complete to you, you have people who are with you. You're like shoulder to shoulder figuring it out together. Together we can figure out a lot. By ourselves, the trauma will kick in and guide our thinking. So many people are feeling blocked from connecting with other people. And if you find yourself trying and trying, but everything seems shallow and nothing seems to lead to friendship, or people even seem to be pulling away from you, there might be a problem with your attunement, your ability to sense another person's openness, or read the room, as we say. So when you're not connecting, instead of just assuming that other people are closed, there are some adjustments that you can make in yourself that help you to tune in better, so that other people feel seen and heard and like you're present with them. Now, attunement is a super attractive quality to people in almost every context. If you've got attunement going on, people will be drawn to you. And you don't have to be born with it. In fact, if you had trauma when you were a kid, your attunement might have been damaged, at least a little bit, which has telltale signs in some behaviors that I'm going to list for you in this video, all right? So here are some of the signs that your attunement to other people might be a bit off. First, you give unsolicited advice. Do you know what that is? It's when you tell people what to do when they didn't ask you, what should I do? And this is so common. People do it to each other all the time. If you've ever had like a major illness, and when you tell people, I have a major illness, I've been in the hospital, you are going to be bombarded by people who are not attuned, who go, oh, you know what you need to do. You know what medicine you need to take. You know what doctor you need to talk to, what device, what machine, what type of diet, what you need to do. And they'll do this around like weight loss. They'll do it around career, and they'll do it around feelings. And I've noticed that among women, sometimes a lot of how we connect with each other is go, hey, how you doing? How you doing? Well, I'm having this hard thing go on. Well, good friends, women friends, men friends, any kind of friends, are able to hear you say what you're struggling with without jumping in and projecting, right? that they have the answer for you and you just got to listen to them. It's a lack of attunement to assume that just because you're having a problem means you are completely out of touch with solutions. So I remember I was in the hospital on and off for about 4 years, some years back. It was really rough. It was an injury caused by a medical error, a surgery where they damaged a part of my body, and I had 14 surgeries for them to try to fix it. And it didn't go very well. In the end, I did heal, but it was a huge process. And when I would tell people about it, they're like, you need to be taking this vitamin. You need to be eating this. And it was so frustrating because the thing is, it was an injury. It had nothing to do with what I was eating. And in fact, in the end, how I healed it was by tuning out all kinds of input and getting in touch with myself. And what I could feel in myself when I became attuned to myself was how traumatized I was inside. I had this like chronic level of freak out going on. I had been going through a lot in my life. I had gotten divorced and was a single mom. I had lost my job. I had tried dating someone and they died. I had this like going on in my body all the time. And when I was able to be quiet with myself, which actually, ironically, being in the hospital allowed, I could feel what was going on, and I returned to my daily practice techniques, which, by the way, if you've never done them, I talk about them all the time on this channel, and you can find them down in the description section. It's a free course. It's a technique for getting the fearful and resentful thoughts out. And it's been very powerful for me to attune to myself. So when people give unsolicited advice, they're basically like jamming the radar on your own intuition about what's going on. It's not a good thing to do. It's a projection of themselves onto you, and it'll generally be, received as criticism or not listening, or at best, maybe just like self-centeredness. So it's not good to give unsolicited advice. And you can do something instead, right? You can say, I had something like that once. If you ever want to hear what I tried, I'm happy to tell you. And I'm telling you, they probably are not interested. Sometimes when people are sick or unemployed or having a hard time, they're already overwhelmed. What they need is just to know, like, I'm your friend. I'm hearing you. I get it. I feel for you. You can just be present with somebody when they're struggling without telling them what to do. And when you do that, there's like more closeness comes in. You feel more connected. And when your friends feel more connected to you, they might come to you to ask your opinion about things. But that is one really very simple fix that you can make. It's easier said than done, but just to totally end unsolicited advice about what other people should do. All right, a second way that your attunement might be off is a lack of curiosity, where all your opinions about everything are set, everything is, a comment on stuff. Oh, that's because this, and the government always blah, blah, blah. And it's instead of having something you ask about, so not having curiosity. So when somebody says something that you've never heard before or you don't agree with, you could say, that's interesting. What made you come to that conclusion? And actually just listen and let go of your agenda to correct them or try to make sure they understand your way of thinking, but be sincerely curious about how other people feel and what they believe and how they see the world. And you can come out of that still disagreeing with them, but closer to them. And I'm telling you, like, if you haven't yet developed a capacity to be comfortable in the presence of people who have different opinions, and I'm not talking about opinion bullies. Nobody's so comfortable with people, being bullies about that. But that's why I'm saying, don't you be an opinion bully. You can have an opinion difference and have it kindly without any kind of criticism. And I want everybody to remember, like, it's actually good for people to see things in different ways. If we didn't, we'd be robots, we'd just be parts of a computer. If we didn't have a different lens on things. And especially in this time where I just think that, powerful forces want us to be angry at each other, want us to believe that there's only one right opinion and everybody who doesn't have it is bad. This is very, very harmful for your relationships. And if you're going to make a positive contribution in the world, you actually need to learn to stay connected with people and to have a social fabric that is tolerant of people seeing things in different ways. Not just people having different lifestyles, which I think is like at this time in history, like people are a little more tolerant, but seeing things in different ways, and let that be okay. And respect people and not assume that they only have a difference of opinion from you because they're evil or stupid or low information or something, but that they actually have a life experience that's led them to that. Be curious. It's a good way to connect. So you can ask people too, and it's not just about controversy, but when, let's say, people have gone on a vacation, right? You can say, tell me about that. How did it go? What was the best part of it? Is it true that the food in France is so good? Because I was just in France. And it's really fun for me when people ask me questions about my vacation. And then out of attunement, I try not to go on, but it really does make me happy when people are aware that, I just did some traveling and I had some hard things happen and I had some exciting things happen. My son got really sick and I hurt my foot really bad, and I don't need to go on about it, but I love that people are curious. So another thing you can express curiosity about, and this is a way to invite people into a conversation, and it's actually a nice little gentle tactic you can use if things feel tense or disconnected, but you can notice something that's in the environment. It's so nice when you don't have to always talk about like my feelings, your feelings. You can talk about just like the world. You can talk about the environment. And so my husband and I were walking the other night, and there was a really nice sunset. And I was saying, hey, come here, look at this. I wonder what makes the clouds do that. They were, piled so high, and they were shimmering, and they had these colors. And I was wondering what makes them do that. And that's me just saying, hey, look at the sunset doesn't tend to get his attention as much as like a nice science question. And I didn't ask it to manipulate him, but I just noticed like he really likes it when I ask questions and ask him to think about something and about the why of things. He loves that. And so I noted that, like to put that in my pocket as a way to connect with people. All right, here's another way that our attunement can get off, and it's insensitivity to other people, especially the high points and the low points. So let's say that somebody just finished a training or got a degree in something. So we know that sometimes, but have you ever gotten so caught up in your own life or gotten so overwhelmed with your own problems that you forgot to ask friends about it? Or to say, hey, you finished the semester, didn't you? And it was your first semester in your new program. How was it? How'd you do? Well, good job. That was a huge accomplishment. I know you going back to school at this point was a big deal. If you think that there's anything wrong with laying it on a bit thick, there's nothing wrong with laying it on a bit thick. People are walking around so hungry to be seen and recognized and validated a little bit. So for the example of somebody who's gone back to school, that is a big deal. How many people would like to go back to school, but really couldn't overcome all the barriers in front of them? A lot. So when somebody does do it, we gotta hug that person, celebrate them, maybe bring them a cupcake or whatever, something special to recognize that something good happened. To not do that is insensitive, and it doesn't foster connection. And then conversely, when people have had something sad, so let's say their parent died and it's a year later. And this is one thing that Facebook can be handy for, is you know when it's somebody's birthday, because there was a time when I used to remember everybody's birthday, but now I don't, and I have so many people connected to on Facebook that I don't always even know who they are. So I don't go and rush in and say happy birthday to people I don't know. But I try to show up and honor people for their high points, things like birthdays, or if I'm, scrolling through social media and somebody's showing a picture of a grandchild or a new house or a really, beautiful pair of running shoes or something. I try to show up and acknowledge it for them. I'm telling you, if you want to be friends with people, give them a little validation for what's wonderful and for what's hard in their life. That's kind of the material of what closeness is. You don't have to comment. You don't have to relate a similar experience to them. You can just say, oh gosh, those are fantastic running shoes, or the earring that you're wearing just caught the light in that picture and I was scrolling by and then I saw you and I saw how happy you look. Congratulations. So you can always find reasons to give people a kind word or a pat on the back, and you will be rewarded richly with a growth in your connection with them. Here's a weakness that we have sometimes, and it's a form of our insensitivity. You can't own mistakes. So a lot of us were not trained at home what to do when we're mortified or embarrassed about something we've done, or when somebody tells us, hey, you kind of hurt my feelings. So, what do? We clam up, we get defensive, we explain ourselves and justify it, we point out, well, you did the same thing, right? Or we know that we did sort of something a little bit wrong to somebody. Maybe we forgot to pay them back for a small amount that they lent us at a lunch or something. And we don't bring it up unless they bring it up. So this is another thing that's part of insensitivity. And it's totally like how people were socialized. And if you weren't really cared for as a kid, it can be really easy for your mind to always flip to trying to relate to somebody when they tell you something hard. So let's say somebody says, yeah, I went to the doctor last week and it turns out I have skin cancer. And here's what an insensitive person does, trying to relate, say, oh, wow, my aunt had skin cancer. And, you know, she had this thing and they took them off and she did this thing. But you miss the part where you go, oh, wow, are you worried about it? How do you feel about it? And so what's going to happen now? And do you have everything you need? Those are the things that a sensitive, attuned person says. Because when somebody's telling you that something hard is happening like that, or something unpleasant or dangerous or life-threatening, the attuned response is to tune into the feeling that they're having, and to let them know that you heard that. So likewise, this is a little bit of a different situation, but so having a party. Have you ever done this? I throw parties. I wasn't always somebody who threw parties, but now I have enough healing that I really do like to throw parties, and my husband likes to cook, and so sometimes we have parties. And I invite people, and some people never get back to me, which is kind of insensitive. They're not thinking about how I might feel. Some people get back and say, great, I'm coming. Yay. Some people say, oh, thank you for the invitation. I'm not going to be able to make it. Okay, that's okay too. And some people say, oh, I can't make it. You know, I'm invited to 3 different parties that day. And so if I have time, I'll drop by, but probably not. Ouch, that hurts. That's really insensitive to the fact that, I don't know, if you've ever, you know, if you have this around throwing a party, no matter how many times I do it, it feels really bad when people don't realize that I was going out on a limb to even throw a party and invite them. And so I can handle it. I have my daily practice techniques to deal with it. But I have learned that when you get invited to a party, be gracious. You don't have to tell the person, if you have to decline, you don't have to tell them about the amazing party you're already going to. That's a little bit insensitive. You just can say, oh, I'm sorry, I have something already scheduled, but I would love to spend time with you, and I hope I can come next time. And that way you're responding to the vulnerability of the invitation. So you're paying attention. All right. Here's another way that we can lack attunement, and I call it being shielded. And this is something that is really normal, but we develop these habits of being always so busy, or always in a crisis, or always so exhausted. Do you have any of those things? Like, that's something that I've done, and I actually am. I'm pretty busy. It makes me pretty tired, but I found out that when I talked about it a lot, I was actually shutting down connection with people. They were trying to be considerate and not bother me, so they stopped calling me. And I was like, hey, how come I haven't heard from you in so many weeks? And they go, well, you were so busy. You were always telling me how you're so tired and busy. Aha, okay, so lesson learned. My attunement was, I don't need to lay that on other people. I can set boundaries for my time and my energy as needed, but keep the channels open for the connection. So much of this is about boundaries. So many ways that people who had a dysfunctional childhood end up losing attunement is because the boundaries, the skills and practice of setting boundaries isn't there. When you don't have boundaries, you can't really afford to connect with people. You have to kind of come up with a way to keep one foot out the door if you're going to hang out with people at all. Because if you can't sort of say no, or realize, oh, this isn't what I wanted to get into, or this party's getting weird, or this date is very uncomfortable, you need to know confidently that you can get out of it. So it's about setting boundaries. All right, here's another way that people lack attunement, and it's dogmatism. You know, just having very strong points of view, usually about like religion or politics or health, I would say, you know, about what you should and shouldn't eat. And I guess we all know what it feels like to eat with somebody who's like, you're not going to eat that, are you? And that's their dogmatism. They have strong opinions about what should and shouldn't be eaten. And obviously politics. That's why, like, on the Zoom calls for our daily practice group, we're just like, we leave politics at the door, because a lot of people are involved and care and are affected by it, but we don't take it up in the group because we have a common purpose, and we're very sensitive to that common purpose. We're learning a technique for stress release, and so we don't have to bring it into everything that we do. I mean, that is a boundary. With religion or lack of religion, you know, a lot of what I've learned about people and about trauma, I've learned from reading the comments on the 700 or so videos that I've posted on YouTube. I can't even remember how many, a lot of videos, and people comment, and I try to read all the comments. I don't respond personally to all of them, but I try to read them. And there can be these very dogmatic comments there sometimes. So somebody might put a comment. It breaks my heart, this incredible tenderness that people bring sometimes, and they've watched a video that I've made and they're telling me, or maybe they're telling other people in the comment section. I try to be attuned to that. I don't have to respond if they're sort of saying something to everybody, but they will come in and just share like, oh, this video is talking about something that's been so hard for me, and I've been sad all my life, and I'm feeling scared and discouraged about how I'm going to turn this around. I've tried certain things, it hasn't worked, and I'm a little bit hopeful, but I hate to get my hopes up. They're saying something so near to their hearts. So there's these very attuned people who will come in sometimes and say, I'm so proud of you, or I hear what you're saying, I relate, and I hope you'll persevere. I know you can do it. So attuned and supportive things. And then there's people who just come in and say, well, that will never happen because people are just jerks. That's dogmatic. That's a very negative point of view that they have, but they're basically putting their belief system out there. I do a video, let's say, about like being attuned or something, and they just come in and say, it doesn't matter if you're attuned, nobody cares, nobody listens, all men are just terrible, or all women are just this. Or here's one, like I love religious people, but there's a way that some people are dogmatically religious and they get in there and somebody has just said they're struggling with something, they've been trying so hard, and they go, you just need Jesus. And I understand what they're saying, but the thing is, if it were true that you just need Jesus, then everybody who went to church would be a perfect person, which is obvious to the eye and ear that everybody is struggling. All people are human, whether they're religious or not, or this religion or that one, or spiritual. All people struggle sometimes, and all people are finding their own answers to these things. And so to just glop your solution down on somebody else is a way to shut down that attunement, that connection. And if you do want to influence people, if you do want to help them, if you think that the way that you do life, the way that you are spiritual or not spiritual, but that you have ways that are helpful and you want to influence people in a positive way, you start by allowing them to be themselves, and you give them space to find out who you are. And if they are attracted, they might ask you about it. Do you know that phrase, attraction, not promotion? They say that in 12-step, and it's so good. Attraction, not promotion. I remember when I first started going to Al-Anon, the program for families of alcoholics. It was so helpful to me, and I went running home to my family of origin. We had just had a bunch of family members die of alcoholism, actually, and drug addiction. And I ran home, and I'm like, everybody, this Al-Anon, it's the best thing. Everybody has to do it. It's the answer. It's the way. And everybody was just like, woo! They didn't want to hear it. They thought I was crazy, which I wasn't crazy. I had found help, but it wasn't effective for me to come and try to cram it on them. It was a lack of attunement. And if there's one thing I've learned from doing Crappy Childhood Fairy, I and you, none of us, we do not know the answer for each person. We don't know what other people need. We don't know what their next step is. And we do know that people need support. They need the presence of other people while they figure out their own next steps, while they do that. Now, I'm not trying to deny that there are ways of life. There's like religious practices. There are sets of principles, moral principles that you can guide your life by. Stoicism. I love Stoicism. Many of us do. So there's principles that you can use and follow. And it's fabulous that people before us have sort of figured out, here are some principles you can apply. And the Crappy Childhood Fairy method has principles. We have principles like, not all the answers come from talking about the trauma. Sometimes you can refrain from talking and write about it instead. And sometimes healing comes not from looking at the past, even though that's necessary sometimes, but about looking at what are the symptoms going on right now. Those are some of our principles. But if I came out at you yelling and just going, stop talking about the past, stop talking at all, you have to write, you can't look at that. Would you listen to me? No, and nor should you. I don't have your answers. I can tell you what's worked for me, and you get to decide if you do that. So when we interpret everything through our own personal lens, whether it's health, politics, healing, religion. It's a way that we separate from other people. And I think a lot of times it's motivated by an insecurity or even a joy sometimes, that, hey, I found what works. But in maturity, as we get older, I might be older than you watching this for some of you, and I'll tell you, you start to learn like it just doesn't work. And that's also why in our daily practice calls and group coaching calls, we say don't give unsolicited advice, especially stuff like, what you need? You need a good therapist. That's really common. A lot of people, if it's not like a religious thing that you have to do, that they believe that you just have to do and it will solve all your problems, they think that if you just went to therapy, it would solve all your problems. Well, that's also unsolicited advice. So we allow people to sort of find and discover intuitively and through their own experience what they believe their next steps are. Unless they break the law, in which case we decide for them. That's the exception. All right. Another way that you may be lacking attunement and sort of pushing people away is by being untrustworthy. And I'm talking about very specific, subtle things that not everybody realizes they're doing. One is gossip, all right? Gossip is very fun to listen to, and it also clues us in that the person who's doing the gossiping is not a safe person to tell things to. So simultaneously, we would be drawn to somebody who's gossiping, but pull away. So if you're doing gossip, talking about people who aren't present, for entertainment purposes, even if they're strangers, you're cluing other people that you're not quite a safe person. And so, consider letting that go, just not gossiping. Another sort of habit of speech that can trigger people to feel sort of unsafe around you is exaggerating. And I'm the queen of this. Which is an exaggeration. I'm not the queen. I'm not the worst there ever was. But I had a habit of speech, and maybe I still do. I've worked on it. But where I will sort of like push it to the top. I'll be like, everyone feels this way, nobody ever da 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 da. And I've tolerated so much all my life. So I just use these like nobody, always, ever, all my life. And I can't, won't. And it's an exaggeration. And I'm trying to make my point, where I think it comes from is I wasn't listened to very well. And I probably developed a habit of being a little more dramatic to try to like grab people by the ears so they would listen to me, the grown-ups in my life. But the thing is, it comes off as a little bit, shaky as a trustworthy person. That's not the person who exaggerates. Comes off as a bit of a loose cannon. And so that was something that I had to work on. And then here's one that I don't like, because I'm a really busy person. I have a little bit of free time, but sometimes people will say, hey, you want to get together? And I'll go, yeah, sure. And they go, when are you free? And I'll go, well, I have this time and I have this time. And they go, okay, I'll get back to you. And often they don't. And that feels a little bit untrustworthy to me too, or it hurts a little bit. And it makes me a little reluctant to make a plan with people if they don't just come through. Like if you ask, then come through and you tell me when you're available and let's get that thing decided. Or say, I can't decide right now, but I'll let you know by this time so that I'm not holding all that time available. It just hurts a little bit. It hurts a little bit and feels untrustworthy. I guess what people call that is flaky. So why do we end up with these habits? Even if we're good people, why do we end up with these habits that lack attunement? If you recognize these traits in yourself, it's very likely that you developed them because your family had those traits, or they didn't train you. They weren't really present with you, socializing you and teaching you, sort of the fine points of interacting with people and how to be an attuned person. Now, even if they trained you, if you went through a lot of neglect and abuse, that kind of trauma can dull your attunement. Attunement is, it's not just something that you learn, it's a neurological function. It's something that you can sense with your nervous system. Like when you walk in and you're like, oh, what's going on? There's some sort of like grim mood in the room. Or everybody seems like they're laughing behind my back. Like you can sense things, right? But when you've been traumatized, either because of the neurological injury or because you were gaslit about what was really going on, like, mommy's not drunk, get in the car. Either the neurological injury of neglect or the sort of lying to you about reality, you're not good at reading the room. You're not good at reading the signals. Like, even if somebody has to kick you under the table, instead of just like feeling the vibe when people are like, don't talk about that thing you're talking about in front of everybody here, it's private, right? That's attunement. Attunement, being sensitive to, to when people are trying to signal you like, don't talk about it, or come here and help me out. I feel threatened by this person. So also, because we're living with trauma symptoms, we can tend to fill up with fear in social situations. And you know what happens when we're full of fear? We become very self-centered. And I don't say that in a judgmental way, but it's just like, it's very hard to pay attention to what other people are feeling and what's going on when just trying to be okay in the moment is kind of using up all your consciousness. I always use the analogy, it's like having headphones on, very loud, but pretending you're in the room, but you can't really hear people. So you're not attuned. And then, to be actually self-centered is to see people as like, are they a good companion for me? Do I like how I feel around them? But not really asking ourselves the converse. Am I a good companion for them? How are they feeling around me? And a good attuned person is able to hold both of those things. Like, how am I feeling? How are they feeling? Am I a good friend? Are they a good friend? And once we start making mistakes and we feel some shame, we can get very defensive. And when we're defensive, it'll feel like any bit of criticism, if it's coming, if I did something wrong and you're about to criticize me, it feels like it's going to tip you over. It feels like it's going to break you. At its worst, trauma can make criticism feel like a mortal threat, and that you'll just die if it gets in, like you can't let it in. And so defensiveness is a survival strategy, but it works terribly in friendships. So when somebody's unhappy about something, now I'm trusting that you're choosing friends who have criticisms that are not vicious and irrational. And actually, I know we've all had those friends too. So that the rules don't apply to that. You need boundaries with people who are vicious. But when a friend is saying, hey, you really hurt my feelings, and if all you've got is defensiveness, what's going to happen as a consequence of that is a pulling away. So if you can hang out and hear what it is, and very gently with yourself and gently with them say, oh, I care about this. I want to hear what it is. I want to hear what your experience was. And then try not to say anything. Don't say anything right away. Just hold on. Just let it go by, right? Let it go by. If you don't know what to say, you can say, all right, I'm going to think about that. Thank you for telling me. And then you can think about it. I don't know about you, but with criticism, sometimes I need a lot of time to process. My husband is more introverted. He needs a lot of time to process basically everything. And sometimes if feelings are up, I'm just like, no, I want to process everything like right now. I want to talk really fast. I want to talk about everything. And he'll just be like, whoa, and he pulls away, right? He pulls away. So I make allowances for that. Now I know him well enough that he doesn't process everything so fast, and I have to give him space. And that's his defendedness. My defensiveness is to start like refuting and be like, no, I didn't do that. No. And it's not good. So actually like getting a little space and asking for it is a positive thing. Just saying, all right, I'm going to think about that. And then if you really want to go to the advanced level, get back to them about it. And even ask a question and say, hey, I wanted to ask you something about that. When you said that you felt like I was not talking to you at the dinner party, I was just wondering, was there a particular moment that was the most hurtful? Because I want to understand what happened. For that, you get an A. If you can learn what it is, if you can be open to what it is that's pushing people away, that's making your relationships too watery, not as substantial, not as solid as you would like them to be, you win. This is how your life becomes rich with relationships. All right. You're going to need boundaries. Like I said earlier, you're going to need to have confidence that you can get out of a situation, and therefore you can afford to get into a situation. So when you get invited to do something new or hang out with a group of people you've never hung out with before, people who have trauma wounds will often isolate rather than do that because the triggers that could be set off could be too much to deal with. When you have boundaries that you can just say, hey, everyone, I think I'm going to call it a night. Thank you for a nice night out. And they'll say, hey, where are you going so early? And you go, I know, but I was just realizing I need to go right now. A very gracious exit is your boundary. You'll be confident in using your boundaries when you know how to use them elegantly with the least amount of offense to other people. Also, to learn how to buffer your strong emotions. If you had trauma, sometimes emotional dysregulation is going to bring your emotions kind of rushing out quite strongly. And so one of the things that we practice in healing is emotional self-regulation. It doesn't mean we deny our feelings or stuff them down and never deal with them. We just start to become conscious that there are some situations where we don't want our strongest feelings kind of leaking out on everybody, that we're not in the best, safest situation. For example, like when I used to have a boss, right? I didn't want to cry in front of the boss. I did it a couple times, but it was a very difficult and uncomfortable situation. And I would have preferred to emotionally self-regulate and deal with my emotions over here and come back with clear communication, in order to negotiate what I wanted out of the situation. That was my preference. The beautiful thing about healing is you get to decide where you want your life to be. You get to decide how emotional you feel good about being and where you'd rather be discreet and calm. And you get to start having the skills where that works for you. Trauma in your childhood gives you a blind spot that makes it easy to become attached to people who are avoidant. They pull away when you try to pull close. They don't get it about being present for someone or honoring them on special occasions. Avoidant people can do some parts of relationships really well, but over time, they can leave you feeling neglected, disrespected, and alone. But what is it about them that makes it feel, at first at least, that it works so well? Is there something about their indifference that is helpful to those of us with trauma? Is it even possible to be happy when someone seems to intentionally disappoint you all the time? My letter is from a woman I'll call Marilyn, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm writing to you to get clarity over a strong recurring issue I seem to have in my marriage. I'm 30 years old, married for 10 years to a really wonderful guy who does all the right things. He makes decent money. We bought a house last year and were able to decorate it beautifully, which was a big achievement for us." All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to. But let's go through and see what's happening for Marilyn. "We have 2 young children, a little girl and a baby boy. My husband provides much stability for us as a family in all ways I really cannot fault him. However, there are times when my husband seems really distracted, really lost in his own world, and I will try to make bids of connection, like offer him a drink, ask him how he's doing, or just sit next to him, or make a comment about something random, so to get some engagement going between us. But he doesn't see it as asking for connection and will just take my reaching out as the practical form of what I'm initiating. That is, he won't really respond, or just enough so I can not accuse him of being rude. But that distance makes me feel so worthless, like he does not love me, like he completely takes me for granted and doesn't value me. It feels deathly painful. This gets completely exacerbated when we're around people, even close family. My husband gets heavily focused on everyone around him and totally ignores me, unintentionally. Like if I say something, he might just glaze past me like I'm see-through, and if somebody else talks, he's all ears. He recently confessed to me that he feels very self-conscious to display intimate connection in public, and he has trouble showing any signs of affection in public, even just listening intently to when I'm talking or making eye contact. This is becoming so painful for me, especially as we get together with both sides of the family a lot, and I'm becoming increasingly shut down by his behavior. It literally kills me, makes me feel so invalid, unimportant, and small to him. It's coming to the point that I want to avoid family gatherings as I become so uptight by his public avoidance of me. He's nicer to his sister-in-law and her dog than his own wife. My background, I highly suspect. My mom has borderline personality disorder, although not formally diagnosed. She had severe mood swings when she was raising us kids, and treading on eggshells around her was in my bones. She could fly into a full rage where she was not so out of control, chasing after me or my siblings while yelling, "I'm going to beat you, I'm going to kill you." Oh dear. Once I literally had to run to a friend's home for a few hours. When I returned, my mom, now all calm, asked me plainly, "How come you were out for so long?" Completely forgetting her rage attack. It was all so very confusing. There was never food in the house. It was always dirty and heavily dysfunctional. You never knew where to find a simple item like a hairbrush or scissors. Everything was everywhere. Not having hot water for a shower was normal. Only owning bare minimum in everything was normal. Not having clean clothes, etc. I never had friends over, but luckily I did have good friends in later teenage years, which was a real blessing. Good. My mom was completely neglecting us physically and emotionally, of course. In the summer, we used to play with the neighbor kids my age, and I was so envious when their mom called them in for dinner and bath time. I used to watch their family get to eat a fresh meal every night and then lounge in their clean house with fresh pajamas and combed wet hair from their bath, after which they were put to bed. I totally get it. Yeah. Me, on the other hand, nobody called me in for dinner. There was no mother cooking, cleaning, asking how we are, bathing us, handing us fresh pajamas, and tucking us in at night. My mom and dad fought like cats and dogs with loud arguments about everything, like how much money to put in the gas meter and how much salt to put in the soup. There was never talking, only shouting. They're still together. My dad became the classic workaholic and was mostly out of the house. I do have occasional nice memories with him, but I definitely never had a strong relationship with him and felt like he was never really there for me. He was not the strong daddy figure I craved. I used to daydream as a child about the deeply intimate marriage I was going to have, the connection and love and adoration I craved so badly that I never got from my parents. In summary, my question is, how do I handle myself when my husband gets emotionally distant or avoidant when in public and around family? It's coming to the point now where it's really difficult to attend our frequent family gatherings as his avoidance completely throws me off and I'm an emotional wreck for the next few days. Am I the problem or is he, and what can I do about it? Also, occasional days like anniversary and birthdays have become a day of great tension as it leaves me completely wrecked for days, despite communicating multiple times of my need to be romanced and gifted. My husband will not see the significance of those days and do a really casual thing like go out to eat, but without making me feel special or making a fuss, and gifts are rare. He claims I want Instagram romance that does not exist in real life. I say I just want him to tune in and pay attention to me, not so bland and simple. I'm starting to feel desperately unloved and resentful. Please help. Marilyn. Okay, Marilyn. All right. Yeah, you're married to an avoidant. That doesn't mean it's the end. It doesn't mean your happiness is gone forever. I think I can offer some help here. So the attachment style of avoidance is often something that sneaks up on those of us who were totally neglected as kids. We might have anxious attachment, right? Where we weren't very well cared for. Oh gosh, this thing about the other kids getting called in to eat nice dinner and bathed and put to bed, that sounds really nice to me. I get it. I hear you. I didn't have that either. And I remember, just even the food, just wishing I had that good food. And then we extend that to this idealized version of marriage. And maybe it's not idealized, but the deeply intimate marriage that we have seen on TV sometimes, that a few people have that kind of marriage that isn't actually many hours of each day, sort of disconnected, sort of tedious, sort of like real life. But yes, the ideal is deeply held and a good thing. And you want to be able to have that with your partner sometimes. And what you described was just like a classic avoidant. And so as I understand it, what an avoidant is somebody who the intimacy makes them really uncomfortable. They probably had to do without it as kids. They didn't get a ton of attention. And their adaptation, instead of getting, please love me, they got like, I've got this, I'm totally independent. So in a way, when you have anxious attachment, which you may, where you're just craving this attachment and it's making you miserable not to have it. And I think also going into the relationship where you're a little bit blind to the absence of that deep, intimate love that your standard is, going into it blind is kind of an anxious attachment thing to do. We get so overwhelmed with the presence of somebody who loves us and would marry us that, it's like it comes later. And this is a thing that can happen, is the dads, after the kid is born, there's a lot of stuff that changes in the marriage when there are little kids. You have 2 little kids. 2 little kids is a classic interrupter of intimacy and marriage and closeness. And there's a line in the movie Before Sunset, part of the Sunrise trilogy that I love so much, the films by Richard Linklater. And Ethan Hawke's character, when he reconnects with this old flame of his, he says, "I feel like all we are now is business partners running a small nursery." And it is like that with small kids. It does tend to, squash the whole romantic dimension of the marriage that gets you into familyhood. And then you become this unit that's raising kids, getting money, keeping the house in order, getting the lunches, figuring out the childcare and the shoes and the laundry. And all that stuff fills up your life. And so it can be a very hard time for parents in their own way. And it's a reflection of a lot of what their wounding is too. So what you're describing sounds like something that may get better as the kids get older. It may improve. It also could get better if he's good-willed, and it sounds like he is, that he can work on it. This is the solution for a couple where one is avoidant, and really like the only way that a relationship with an avoidant lasts is if one of them is kind of insecure. Like worst case scenario, an avoidant who's not very loving and doesn't give nice gifts, like somebody who is securely attached, they might not be drawn to such a person. Somebody who's insecure attached is drawn because, well, there's just a stability there. They don't break up because the insecure person won't leave. And the one who is avoidant doesn't leave because they can't, their pickings are kind of slim too because of the limitations on what they can do. All right, that's the cynical view. But what if both types, there's a trauma wound there, there's a personality thing there. What if both types though? What if there is a sort of symbiosis there? And this is what I think. I think those of us who are insecure, we often tend to have like intense emotions. Maybe we didn't do so well in relationships because we expected so much. Well, somebody who's avoidant and sort of numbed out, they're immune. They can tolerate a lot of that sort of emotional intensity in us. Even though they don't like it and they pull away around emotions and demands, they can tolerate it better. They're sort of tough around it. So in a way, both people kind of fit. And that might be, I'm not going to say definitely that's what you have, but that it can be that way. It can be part of the dynamic that's difficult, but not the end of the world. All relationships have their difficulties, and I don't mean to minimize. An avoidant is not easy, but now that you have little kids, you have a high incentive to find a way to meet in the middle. And how an anxious person and an avoidant person, an anxious, insecure attached, I should say, insecure and anxious, how they meet in the middle is, from your side, you need to be a little bit more flexible to be able to allow him to be who he is. You need to have friends and other support people. And you have these family people, and I think, friends. There's just no substitute for friends, of people who can help meet your emotional needs who aren't him, so that you're not, just frustrated and sad all the time that your life lacks the love that you think has to come from him. It doesn't. We can sort of distribute our needs across several people, and it can work very well. What he needs to do to meet you in the middle, if he's willing, if he, I'm sure you've asked for it, but he needs to just sort of try a little harder. He needs to have the gift. He needs to remember that it's Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or your birthday or Christmas. And he needs to pay more attention to that. You can help him by telling him, what would be a great gift for me? I would really like to have this, tracker watch, or I would really like to have this set of garden pots, or you just let him, help him out. Avoidant people, their thinking just doesn't really go there very easily. And it can be a service to them to just tell them what would make you happy. So you have to meet in the middle. He can try harder to express love, but really what each individual in a relationship of any kind has to do ultimately is accept the person for who they are. In the end, you could leave the relationship, but that's extreme for parents of small children, very extreme. I think there's a lot of wiggle room here for you two to make an adjustment. I really feel for you. Having little kids, your needs are so great. You lose so much of, it's like life is just so intense and challenging that it would be so nice if somebody would just come and say, "Oh, my darling, you've worked so hard today. Let me just hold you in my arms and rub your feet and I'll make the dinner." And like, yes, that would be lovely. But we don't always get all the lovely things that we could imagine having. And there it is. There it is. So just in case your husband sees this, I hope he hears meet in the middle. Would you give it a try? And for you, you can ask for what you want and you can start dealing with the feelings that come up for you. You're bound after the childhood you had, after not being cared for at all, it's got to hurt. I'm sure it's like a well of pain that opens that's very, very deep. So I relate to that. And what I'm going to point you towards is my daily practice technique. There needs to be a way for this feeling of pain and sadness to not be stuffed down or denied. We don't have to like vent and scream and cry, but we also don't just deny that it's there. We can face it and have relief from the intensity of the emotions by writing them. And my technique is a very specific way to do that. It's really helpful for many, many people and not just me. And it helps us be at equilibrium more of the time. It helps us stay emotionally regulated. And that, for a parent, happens to be a golden zone that's very good for your kids too. When you're neurologically regulated and emotionally regulated, they will tend to co-regulate on you.